Hello and welcome to the stream. I'm Josh Rushing, sitting in for Femi OK today. Today we're looking at the widening, escalating tensions in Israel and the Palestinian territories. And before we get to that, I actually want to go to YouTube here for a minute because we're live on YouTube. If you're watching there, see that box over there? Those comments? We actually have a live producer in there waiting to get your comments to me so I can include them in the show. Now, speaking of YouTube, video and sharing, I want to start by showing you a video that went a bit viral earlier this month of a settler talking to one of the families living in the Al-Jarrah, the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood of occupied East Jerusalem. Here, check this out.
Jacob, you know this is not your house.
Yes, but if I go, you don't go back. So what's the problem? What are you yelling at me? I didn't do this. I didn't do this.
But
it's easy to yell at me, but I didn't do this.
You are stealing my house.
And if I don't steal it, someone else is going to steal it.
No one is allowed to steal it, ya ammi.
Okay, the woman there who says you are stealing my house, and the settler who says if I don't steal it, someone else will steal it. Her name is Mona AlKurd, and we have an update on her situation. This is posted to Twitter within the last hour. Let's go to my screen. This is Mona being forcibly removed from her house in her neighborhood in the Sheikh Jarrah area of occupied East Jerusalem tonight. Posted to Twitter within the last hour. And then here is her brother. This is her brother Mohammed being removed by Israeli security forces from his neighborhood, Sheikh Jarrah, in occupied East Jerusalem. Again, these are posted within the hour. All right. I want to bring in our guest to talk about this and what this means. I'm going to ask our guests to introduce themselves first. Noor, can we begin with you? Can you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Hi, my name is Noor Odeh. I'm a media professional, a former Al Jazeera reporter, but now more into politics and public diplomacy, if we still have room for that.
Great, thank you. Hey, Hagai?
Hi, Hagai Matar. I'm the executive director of Plus 972 magazine, which is an independent media outlet run by Israeli and Palestinian journalists.
Great, thank you, Hagai. And Youssef?
Hi, I'm Youssef Menayer, a Palestinian-American scholar and analyst based just outside of Washington, D.C.
Thank you all for being on this stream today. Noor, we're going to begin with you. Can you tell us about this video that we're seeing of the AlKurd family being removed from their neighborhood, the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood, and what that means and what that might do to the escalating tensions there?
Well, it certainly won't help with the escalating tensions. Basically, what we're seeing is every Palestinian's nightmare. Whether you live in Jerusalem or anywhere in the West Bank, what you fear is exactly that, being removed from your home, having it demolished, having it, for some reason, declared unwanted by the Israeli occupation. And to see Mona, who's been fighting so hard and so eloquently for so many years, kicked out like that with her brother is just heartbreaking, and it will only fuel the rage that we've seen all over the West Bank and even inside Israel, and it has boiled over to Gaza, as we know, over the past few days. So,
guys, I understand it. The court has not ruled that those families have to leave their homes yet. The fact that this is happening tonight in the middle of these tensions, is this a message?
Well, there's been an ongoing court case here for ever so long. So the court decision is still pending. It was actually delayed recently just because Israel is fearing this escalation and asks the court to postpone judgment based on security considerations, just because whatever happens in Sheikh Jarrah has been influencing the rest of Jerusalem, the rest of Israel-Palestine completely. And Noor is completely right. When we see all this happening, it is having a direct impact on what's happening right now in Jaffa, in Lid, in Haifa, in Gaza. It's all interconnected right now.
I want to bring in a comment from someone in our community. This is Micah Danzig. He's actually a former soldier with the IDF, and now he's with Harut, North America. And he actually has something to say about this neighborhood.
I understand why Al Jazeera viewers would want to focus on Palestinian Arab grievances, including in the Shimon HaTzadik, Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood. But what about justice for the original residents of Shimon HaTzadik, the Jewish residents who bought homes there in 1882 and were ethnically cleansed from those homes by the Jordanian army in 1948? And also, what about understanding the core cause of the Arab-Israeli conflict? We're never going to get to that until we understand the role that anti-Jewish racism has played in the Arab world for over a millennia, well before the advent of modern Zionism.
Yusuf, can you respond to the two whataboutisms there in the video?
Yeah, I'm happy to. And let me just say about the video we just saw, I want to just have viewers realize that what you just watched there, and the reason why what is happening in Sheikh Jarrah has become as significant as it has, and has mobilized as many Palestinians as it has, in Jerusalem, around Jerusalem, and throughout the entirety of the land, is because while what's happening in Sheikh Jarrah is very much typical of what Palestinians in Jerusalem have been facing, it is typical of the Palestinian experience altogether. The experience of being forced from your home, from where you live, from your neighborhood, from your families, from your society, is an experience that every Palestinian, everywhere, can connect to, across generations. And, I personally would absolutely welcome the opportunity to talk about historical justice, particularly for 2/3 of the Palestinian population, which were forced from their homes in 1948, denied return to them by law through the use of discriminatory law by the State of Israel, which allows a Jewish person from Brooklyn, like the fellow we saw at the start of this conversation, to immigrate to the home of a Palestinian refugee that's denied return to it, living in a refugee camp just a few dozen miles away. So I think we should have that conversation. We should have it holistically. I welcome it. And I believe that people who've been forced from their homes, like the Al-Kurd family, who is experiencing this for the third time now, across several generations, should have a right, absolutely, to return to their homes and their properties and to live with freedom and equality in those places.
Thanks, Chief. You kind of place that in the broader context. I'm going to bring in another comment from someone in our community. This is from Ramy Corey. He's the Director of Global Engagement at American University of Beirut.
The 1 million Palestinians who have been expelled from their homes by the British initially, then by Zionist gangs, and then by the State of Israel and its courts and military, those 1 million have now become around 9 million Palestinian refugees. Most of them are in and around the territory of Palestine. They're not going anywhere. They want a political resolution, and only a political resolution will stop the fighting. It can happen. It happened in South Africa. It happened in Northern Ireland, and it certainly can happen here. And we need better political leaders on all sides to make it happen.
Nor, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think he hit it right on the head. But going back to that soldier who obviously received very good public speaking training, this whataboutism is, I'm personally really fed up with it, because I think that it goes to the dehumanization of Palestinians. It continues to tell people that, but wait a minute, these Palestinians, they're not really poor Palestinians. You shouldn't really feel any sympathy for them. Don't be fooled by the tears. There's really a bigger story, and it's because all Arabs and all Palestinians hate Jews, and that's really not what it is. It produces what's happening to something that is really not related to the events. But more importantly, it glosses over the fact that this Kurd family cannot claim the homes they were dispossessed from because Israeli law does not allow them to do that. And because these courts have not been known to rule in favor of any Palestinians, even when they prove that the paperwork presented by these settlers is actually falsified. And there are cases where these things have happened. So to talk about court cases as if, and a delay in court hearings, as if that really makes a difference, I think is misleading. We should tell the viewers that these courts are there as a cover, in my opinion. They're a tool of the dispossession machine. They're not a recourse for people to seek justice. And that's a very important thing. I don't know personally why families keep going to Israeli courts. Personally, I wouldn't. I understand their desperation, But I just don't think that these are courts that can deliver justice or were designed to deliver justice for Palestinians. They just simply aren't.
Can I just follow up on that point
slightly,
by Noor?
Yeah. Go ahead, Yusuf.
Go ahead, Yusuf, and then we'll come to you, Hagai.
I just wanted to reinforce Noor's point here. You know, Sheikh Jarrah is in occupied territory. It's in territory that the entire world, with the exception of the State of Israel, and perhaps one or two, nations in the Pacific Ocean, recognize as occupied territory where international humanitarian law and the Geneva Conventions is the legal framework, right? Not the Israeli court system. But of course, the Israeli government has illegally annexed this territory and does not care what the rest of the world thinks. So unfortunately, Palestinians living in Jerusalem are forced into a situation where the only legal mechanism they have for any sort of redress is within a system that is specifically set up to dispossess them, a set of laws that are designed to privilege one group over the other and to facilitate the taking of land from one people and to give it to another. So, you know, I think this is it's a madness in some ways that Palestinians are left with no choice but to engage in a legal system that is designed to deliver injustice to them.
Okay.
I completely agree. That's everything I want to say.
Well, we have a comment from another person in our community from Human Rights Watch, Akshaya Kumar. Check this out. She has a word for what to call this.
In a system where Israeli settlers are able to fill their swimming pools with subsidized water while Palestinians are left queuing in line for buckets, a system where an American Jewish person who's lived their whole life abroad can travel to Israel to retire without concern, while a Palestinian who goes abroad even for a few years for graduate studies is worried about losing their residency. We can't look at every single instance, every single violation in isolation. Instead, we need to consider the system of oppression under which Palestinians are living. And the right word to describe that system is the crime of apartheid.
Apartheid. And let me show you what's happening in Gaza. This happened within the last 24 hours. Let's bring up the video with the bombing of the car.
What should I say? What should I say? This is a crime. They were civilians, a woman, her children, a barber and a shop owner. These are the people who were at the scene. They didn't hit a militant nor an official. We are civilians sleeping at our homes.
Looking at our YouTube comments, there's a lot of comments that are pro-Israel, and there's a lot of comments that are free Palestine. Everyone seems to see this from their own perspective. But as the fighting's happening down in Gaza, Harry Fawcett from Al Jazeera is reporting that Israeli troops are moving toward the border there. Can you guys comment on what's happening in Gaza? Noor?
Sure. I think I would be happy to say that basically what we're seeing right now is first and foremost a result of intentional escalation on the side of Israel for the past month, or a little more than a month. There have been a series of decisions, first in attacking people that were in prayer or in fast in Damascus Gate, attacking them during Iftar. After that, or at the same time, there's the attack on Sheikh Jarrah that we've seen. We've also seen the attacks on Al-Aqsa Mosque that drew people from across Palestine to show solidarity. And only then, when Hamas started firing rockets at Israel, at civilians in Israel, did Israel choose to respond with great force, killing so far about 50 people, of them about 14 children, and that's within the past 2 or 3 days. These are terrible, terrible crimes. To add to that, I want to mention that these images that you were just showing are images that most Israelis don't really get to see. They're missing from Israeli media. They're not part of what we see here. If you open Israeli newspapers or news editions, you would see the rocket fire from Gaza that had so far killed about 5 Israelis, but hardly any images from Gaza where dozens of Palestinians have been killed by Israel. And that is just twisting the way that most Israelis perceive the situation and think of themselves, ourselves, as the main victim of the situation.
What do you make of the timing? This is happening at the end of Ramadan with aid coming in the next 24 hours. Then how much does this have to do with Netanyahu's own political struggles? These
I think
provocations?
Netanyahu's political struggles are very, very central to this. Just to contextualize, Netanyahu has basically lost his opportunity to form a coalition government. A few days ago, it was very, very likely that within the coming few days, we would have seen a new government being formed across extreme right-wing, moderate right-wing, center-left, and Palestinian parties. A very, very strange coalition was expected to be formed that would oust Netanyahu. Basically, these moves were perfectly timed, really to the day, to lead to the situation where that potential coalition has completely fallen apart by now. The chances of that being created are very much diminished. And right now, the chances, because of this escalating violence, because what we're seeing also in terms of mob attacks and lynches of Palestinians by Jews, of Jews by Palestinians throughout the land right now, in addition to what's happening in Gaza, that government will not be formed. There will either be a right-wing government or we will go into a 5th round of elections sometime soon.
Noor?
And can I, I want to tell you that every time there are elections in Israel, Palestinians kind of take a deep breath and say, well, we should gear up for a round of escalation. And it usually is in Gaza because that's where the blood bank is, right? That's where you can flex your muscles and show that you're the big guy. And this is even more dangerous. What's happening right now is more dangerous. I'm not sure that Netanyahu was thinking about the consequences, but what he has managed to do, in addition to probably saving his own political behind, is to galvanize Palestinian anger across historic Palestine. And this is a scene we have not witnessed since the year 2000. And the feeling of interconnectedness, the colors of our pain as Palestinian may vary. It's a gradient, right? Every group of us has their own struggles and their own crosses to bear. But right now, all of that is coming across in a unified, very loud expression of anger and oneness. And I think that's very significant. And there will be more, developments coming out of this as far as Palestinians are concerned. But talking about having Israeli troops enter into Gaza or even escalate further the violence that is being brought onto Gaza, I think, in my mind, personally cannot bear just the idea. This is an area that has been battered continuously for over 14 years. Psychologically, what we're talking about is a population that is trapped with nowhere to go. You're showing a building that houses a lot of our memories as journalists in Gaza. It housed many media offices, including the AFP and Reuters, I think, at one point, or AP. But anyways, so when there is talk about, more or maybe ground troops in Gaza, we know what that means. We know that now that the death toll will go dramatically higher. Now the pain will increase more. And now the attempt to even reconstruct the pieces, put the pieces back together in Gaza will be all the much more difficult. And to know that this is done for political expediency just makes it all the more difficult, to be honest with you, to swallow, given all this whataboutism that we're hearing. I'm
going to bring in some comments that are in YouTube right now. This is from Mr. Bill. It says, where are the advocates of human rights now? Surprise. Something says, the question should be, when will both sides stop launching rockets? Someone else says, this is injustice, and everyone standing by is guilty of injustice. Palestine is being crushed, and Israel is playing the victim. It is clear to see that Israel won't stop until they've taken everything. I'm curious, Yusuf, how was the Biden administration going to respond to this, and does that change the political calculation happening in Israel now?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to understand the situation today, we have to look at sort of how we got to this point in terms of some of the shifts in Israeli politics. And, I absolutely agree with Hakai on the fact that this seems like a very sort of deliberate and calculated process that led us to this point. Even before the original court date for the Sheikh Jarrah families, the Israeli authorities had several opportunities to de-escalate the situation in Jerusalem, and chose time and again the path of escalation and further confrontation with people, closing off public space, shutting off the speakers in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, closing access to the Damascus Gate, and ultimately culminating in attacks within the Al-Aqsa Mosque itself, an enraging sight to people all over the world. And I think to understand how we got to this moment, you also have to see the dramatic and increased shift in Israeli politics to the far right. Today, Israeli politics is dominated by right-wing ideologues to an extent that we have never seen before. Really, today in the Knesset, the vast majority of the Knesset seats are held by right-wing ideologues. The choices today are between, the Likud party, Likud Light, Likud Extra, Likud Ultra. It's all various flavors of the same right-wing ideology. This has come to dominate Israeli politics. And we have Kahanists today that are within the Israeli Knesset. And one thing we should keep in mind about Benjamin Netanyahu, he is perhaps unique among Israeli politicians of his stature in his ability to utilize communal violence and to motivate activists into taking extreme measures when his political prospects are in jeopardy. And anybody who watched the role that he played prior to the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin in the 1990s knows exactly what he is capable of. So when you ask about the Biden administration, look, Israeli politics has moved in this direction within the context of complete and total impunity because of American policy and protection. When we have sent the message time and again to the Israelis that the more aggressive you get, the more belligerent you get to Palestinians, we're going to continue to reward you with our support and with our cover and with our tax dollars, we've incentivized a race to the right. And that's exactly what happened. The United States has a great degree of complicity in the monster that's been created today. And it's only getting uglier. Yeah,
I have less than a minute, but Biden's got, about 3.5 years to address that. Do you see a change of course in the way the U.S. deals with Israel?
I think there is change that you're starting to hear in conversations about this that's increasingly coming into, the spaces where elected officials exist, but it's not yet with the administration. That said, they may not be in a position to ignore this, particularly as things get more and more violent and ugly, and more people are calling on them to recognize their role in enabling it.
Thank you.
And public opinion in the U.S. is shifting on this, including within Jewish communities. So I think that will also hopefully play a role in getting the administration on board to pushing for active change.
And Nora, I have less than a minute left. What should we look for in the next 24 to 48 hours as we're watching events there?
I think you should look for what happens within Palestinian politics, within Palestinian towns and cities, in the occupied territory and within Israel. This, again, sense of oneness, I think, is something to watch and to keep track of. The youth in Palestine do not recognize these imposed borders, and they are united in their sense of urgent collective action. Regrettably, on the ground, I see nothing but escalation at this point, especially because we have a spineless administration.
Thank you, Nora. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we'll watch this as it develops over the coming hours. Thank you. See you next time.